Hello there. We're going to be learning about Anishinaabe oral traditions today. What we're going to go over is a general outline, what is defined as oral tradition in the Anishinaabe or Ojibwe culture, why it's important to their culture, what it might sound like or look like, and how we can work to preserve those oral traditions. Now, what is oral tradition in the Anishinaabe culture? It is storytellings, teachings, family, and tribal history. It's culturally and historically significant. There are four different basic categories, and those fall into legends, myths, folk tales, and memorits. And we'll go over what those are in a next slide. Okay, a legend is specific to the event surrounding a certain place or landmarks. So if you think the legend of Sleepy Hollow, it is about a place and the people or the events that happened in that area. So that would be a legend. A myth is the account of an event from the beginnings of time. Think creation myths. This explains the hows and the whys of the world, how things are organized. It gives reason to why everything is the way it is according to the Anishinaabe culture and belief system. Folk tales are stories that people know are not true, did not actually happen, but they teach an important moral lesson or ethical lesson. And a memorit is a personal account of an encounter with the supernatural. Now, um, these tend to be more within within certain tribes, but also within certain families. If maybe you can think of a certain, when Grandpa went to the Civil War battlefield and saw the ghost of his great grandfather, General so and so, something significant to a family or culture, but is a personal experience with a supernatural element. Now, the importance of oral tradition, it accounts for the origins of the people, the tribe, and the world. This is how they understand the world about them, their culture, their faith. Um, it emphasized those religious values, important tribal ethics, social patterns, and education. Things like interacting with your elders, interacting with the young, gender norms, and conformity or nonconformity, the relationship between people and earth, people and animals, environmentalism. Every aspect of their life was shared through these oral traditions. Sometimes they're the only account of a historical event. If you think of Christopher Columbus, in schools, in American schools, people are mostly taught that he was this okay guy that explored the world, discovered America, and did all these great things to build the nation. But in reality, Columbus was lost, thought he was in India, and then immediately started to pillage and create this genocide and slaughter these people. And that side of history you won't see in books so much because it was largely passed down through oral traditions of Native people. It wasn't something someone wrote down in a book with a quill and ink. It was told from person to person and through these tribes, and that is probably largely why we haven't seen it in history books, besides whitewashing. Certain myths are part of tribal rites, especially those religious rites or rites of passage. And to that end, specific myths and in particular myths, because they do tend to deal with religious and faith aspects, can only be relayed by tribal elders or people who are trusted to tell that story. Some can only be heard by certain members of the tribe based on age or where they are status-wise within the tribe. Some of these myths are very fiercely guarded. They cannot be heard or discussed until it is the proper time to do so, and some uh, people who are not native may never hear because they are not to be told to non-native peoples. Some examples, I apologize, this is very tiny over here. It is the Ojibwe Dreamcatcher legend or folk tale. Um, And I'm not going to read the whole thing for you, but it basically, we all have seen a dream catcher. We've seen ones that are made by Native people, and unfortunately, ones that have been culturally appropriated. And this is the legend of the dream catcher and what the significance is uh, of that in the Native culture and what it stands for, who created it. The Spider Woman who wanted to take care of her children and wanted to project positivity and good thoughts and good dreams, and take care of the children of the nation, and watch over them as they split off into the four corners of North America. Over here on this side, we see a picture of Thurza Defoe. She is a Grammy Award winning performer. She is a storyteller who tells in the Anishinaabe Ojibwe tradition. This is a recording about an hour long of her performing at the National Museum of American Indians in 2012. It's presented by the Smithsonian. It's very lovely. I highly suggest you follow the link and check it out. Preservation of these stories. Now, some have been written down. A lot of you can find, books that have more of the folk tales that have been written down or versions of them. There, but I will say, when researching stories and trying to find one, it is quite hard on the internet anyway. I didn't find a whole lot written down. I found more recordings, like web pages with different recordings of stories, and most of them were in the Ojibwe language. So, like I said, a lot of them are recorded, and there's sources and websites to find those things, or like I said, like I found on YouTube videos of these stories being told. And obviously these are stories that can be told to non-Native people, and some of these stories don't hold some of the religious significance of the ones that can't be shared to everyone or at certain times. Most often, these are preserved by passing down from one generation of a tribe to the next. That is the most common way that these stories are preserved, is just keeping that cultural richness within themselves, and passing it from, mother to daughter, father to son, grandchild. Take a moment to turn and talk. How can a non-Native person help preserve this piece of culture? What are non-Natives doing now to preserve oral tradition? I want you to take a pause here. You can pause the video and talk to your neighbor about these 2 points. What do you see being done or have heard of being done? How can a non-Native person help preserve these? Is it through education? Is it through art exhibits? Is it through simply sharing what you know, or maybe visiting there? Sometimes they open their traditional ceremonies to non-natives. What could be done? What could you do? Now, our activity for this lesson is a journal entry. So I want you to search YouTube or Audible or iTunes or podcasts, whatever, or Google search it for Anishinaabe storytellers. There are many recordings. I want you to choose one of these recordings and pick out a legend, a folktale, or a myth to listen to. And you are going to create a journal entry about your listening experience. What I would like you to write about is, what does the story describe? Is it a legend, a folktale, a myth? How do you know? What's the event? What are the morals or ethics told? Is it a creation story? Is it a moral story that teaches you right from wrong? What resonated the most with you about this story? Write on that. Why do you think this story was passed down through generations? And finally, think of a story told in your own family and why it's told and why it's significant. Try to connect something from your life to these oral traditions. So I can't wait to read these journal entries and hear about what you think of these stories, these traditions, your thoughts on them, and